Extreme measures. Johnny Moore was nervous. It was his first day as a police officer in the city of Los Angeles, and he'd been assigned to work with Detective Hernan Dominguez, also known as the Shadow. He had heard stories about him, how he'd single-handedly taken down a drug cartel in a dark, abandoned factory without using any night vision or flashlight, how he'd earned the respect and fear of his colleagues, who called him the Shadow ever since, how he was ruthless, cold, and mysterious. Johnny wondered why he'd been paired with him. He was nothing like Dominguez. He was young, idealistic, and eager to make a difference. He joined the police force after graduating from college, hoping to follow the footsteps of his father, who died in the line of duty when Johnny was only 10 years old. He'd always admired his father, who'd been a hero in his eyes. Johnny arrived at the police station and looked for Dominguez. He found him in his office, sitting at his desk, surrounded by files and papers. "Good morning, sir. I'm Johnny Moore, your new partner," Johnny said, extending his hand. Dominguez looked up from his work and stared at him with a piercing gaze. He ignored his hand and motioned him to sit down. "Johnny Moore, huh? You're the son of James Moore, right?" Dominguez asked. "Yes, sir. He was my father," Johnny said. "I knew him. He was a good cop, a good man," Dominguez said. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot to me," Johnny said. "Don't call me sir. Call me Hernan, or the Shadow if you prefer," Dominguez said. "Okay, Hernan," Johnny said. "So you're my new partner. How do you feel about that?" Dominguez asked. "I'm honored, sir. Hernan. I've heard a lot about you. You're a legend in this department," Johnny said. "A legend? Don't believe everything you hear, kid. I'm just a cop who does his job. Nothing more, nothing less," Dominguez said. "Well, I'm looking forward to learning from you. I'm sure you have a lot of experience and wisdom to share," Johnny said. "Experience and wisdom? Is that what you think this is about? Listen, kid, this is not a school. This is not a game. This is the real world. And in the real world, there are no rules, no morals, no justice. There are only choices and consequences," Dominguez said. "What do you mean?" Johnny asked. "I mean that sometimes you have to do things that are not right, but necessary. Things that go against your principles, but save your life. Things that make you question your sanity, but get the job done," Dominguez said. "Like what?" Johnny asked. "Like killing someone who deserves to live, or letting someone live who deserves to die, or betraying someone who trusts you, or trusting someone who betrays you," Dominguez said. "Have you done any of those things?" Johnny asked. Dominguez smiled and leaned back in his chair. "Maybe I have. Maybe I haven't. Maybe I will. Maybe I won't. The point is, you never know what you're capable of until you're faced with a situation that forces you to make a choice that could change your life forever," Dominguez said. Johnny felt a chill run down his spine. He wondered what kind of situation Dominguez was talking about. He wondered what kind of choice he would have to make. He didn't have to wait long to find out. Dominguez's phone rang and he answered it. "Yeah? What? Where? When?" "Okay, we're on our way," Dominguez said and hung up. He grabbed his jacket and gun and stood up. "Come on, kid. We have a case," Dominguez said. "What kind of case?" Johnny asked. "A murder case," Dominguez said. "Who's the victim?" Johnny asked. "The mayor's daughter," Dominguez said. Johnny's heart sank at the mention of the victim. The mayor's daughter? This was no ordinary case. It was high profile and politically charged. He knew that solving this murder would be a daunting task, especially with the pressure from the city's elite and the media. As they hurried to the car, Johnny couldn't help but feel a mix of anxiety and excitement. This case was his chance to prove himself, to make a real difference, just like his father had wanted for him. But working alongside Detective Hernan Dominguez, the Shadow, made him even more uncertain. The man's cryptic words about choices and consequences echoed in his mind. During the car ride to the crime scene, Dominguez remained unusually silent. Johnny took the opportunity to study his partner. Despite his reputation for being ruthless and enigmatic, there was a depth to Dominguez's eyes that hinted at a hidden past. Johnny wondered what had led him to become the Shadow. and whether he had ever faced the kind of moral dilemmas he had mentioned. Arriving at the crime scene, Johnny was taken aback by the chaos. Police cars, flashing lights, and reporters swarmed the area. They entered the mansion where the murder had taken place. The scene was a nightmare. Blood-stained, shattered glass, and the lifeless body of the mayor's daughter, Jessica, lay on the marble floor. Johnny struggled to maintain his composure, but Dominguez's cold detachment was unsettling. As they began their investigation, Johnny noticed his partner's keen attention to detail. It was as if Dominguez had an uncanny ability to see things others couldn't. Hours turned into days, and the case became increasingly complex. Suspects emerged, secrets were uncovered, and Johnny was faced with difficult decisions. He watched as Dominguez navigated the murky waters of politics and power, making choices that sometimes went against his own principles. One evening, as they reviewed the evidence in their dimly lit office, Johnny couldn't hold back his curiosity any longer. He looked at Dominguez and asked, "Hernan, do you ever regret the choices you've made in this job?" Dominguez paused, his gaze fixed on a photo of Jessica, her smile frozen in time. "Regret is a luxury we can't afford," he finally replied. "But we must always carry the weight of our choices. It's what keeps us sharp, Johnny." Their investigation led them down a twisted path of betrayal, conspiracy, and deception. They uncovered a web of lies that reached far beyond what they had imagined. Johnny began to understand why Dominguez had earned his reputation as the Shadow. He wasn't just a cop, he was a survivor. Someone who'd learned to adapt to the darkness of the world they lived in. As they closed in on the killer, Johnny couldn't help but reflect on the lessons he'd learned from his enigmatic partner. He'd come to realize that being a police officer meant facing the harsh realities of life and making choices that could haunt you forever. But he also understood that sometimes those choices were necessary to bring justice to the world, no matter how dark it may seem. In the end, they solved the case, bringing the murderer to justice. Johnny had proven himself as a capable detective, and he gained a deeper understanding of the complexities of their profession. As they stood outside the mayor's mansion, Johnny looked at Dominguez, a newfound respect in his eyes. "You were right, Hernan," Johnny said. "In this job, there are no easy choices, but we must make them anyway." Dominguez nodded, his expression unreadable. "Welcome to the world of shadows, Johnny. It's a place few can navigate, but it's where we make a difference." And with that, they walked into the night, two shadows determined to protect the city from the darkness that lurked within. Months passed since Johnny and Detective Hernan Dominguez had solved the high-profile murder case of the mayor's daughter. Their partnership had grown stronger, and Johnny continued to learn from the enigmatic detective, cementing their reputation as a formidable team within the department. One evening, Johnny received an anonymous tip about a series of unsolved cold cases that seemed to be connected by a mysterious thread. The cases involved seemingly random victims who'd all met gruesome ends, and the department had hit dead ends at every turn. Intrigued by the challenge, Johnny decided to dig deeper, even though the cases had long been closed and forgotten. He secretly gathered the case files and evidence, not sharing his discoveries with anyone, not even Dominguez. The more Johnny delved into the details, the more he became convinced that there was a pattern, a hidden truth that had eluded them all. He started connecting the dots, drawing lines between victims, dates, and locations. One evening, Johnny was going through the evidence in his private office when he came across an old newspaper article about a police officer who'd been hailed as a hero for solving a particularly gruesome murder case decades ago. The officer's name was James Moore, Johnny's father. As Johnny read through the details of the case, he realized that it bore a striking resemblance to the recent unsolved murders. The similarities were chilling. Both cases involved a specific modus operandi, and the victims' names seemed to be cryptic clues. In shock, Johnny began to suspect that his father might have been the killer in these cold cases. The evidence was circumstantial, but the parallels were too eerie to ignore. He couldn't believe it. How could his father, a hero in his eyes, have committed such heinous acts? Unable to keep his discovery to himself, Johnny finally confided in Detective Dominguez. He expected his partner to react with skepticism, but instead, Dominguez's expression remained impassive. "I've known about those cases, Johnny," Dominguez admitted quietly. Johnny was taken aback. "You knew? Why didn't you say anything?" Dominguez sighed. "Because it's not that simple, Johnny. Those cases are connected to a dark and dangerous secret within the department. A secret that goes deeper than you can imagine." Johnny's world was spinning. He couldn't comprehend the implications of what he had uncovered. The hero image he had held of his father shattered, and he realized that he was now facing a choice even more difficult than any he'd encountered before. Should he continue his pursuit of the truth, even if it meant exposing the darkest secrets of the police department and his own family? As Johnny grappled with his revelation, he and Dominguez found themselves on a path that would change their loyalty, integrity, and the very foundations of the justice system they had sworn to uphold. The investigation into the cold cases would uncover a web of corruption, cover-ups, and hidden truths that neither of them could have anticipated, leading to a plot twist that would redefine their roles as detectives and ultimately change the course of their lives forever.